Okay, I think we're about ready to get this webinar started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gene King. I am Senior Managing Director for Sequence Holdings, an investment banking and consulting firm based out of Charleston, South Carolina. And also, I'm the new chairman of the board of directors for the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast. I'd like to welcome everyone today to our second session of the InvestAmerica DHP Brazilian America Chamber of Commerce Southeast event. Today we're going to be talking about immigration and investments. And it's important to understand this is our second session, and today we'll talk about the E-2 investor visa. Before we move on into introductions to our panelists, and they're a really good panel, our conversation and topics, I'd like to bring to light a few points before we get started. First, I hope everyone can hear me okay. You should hear everyone else on the panel the same way, but if you have any technical difficulties at all, please use the chat button at the bottom where it says all panelists and attendees, and just click in there whatever problems you might have. And we have several folks that can immediately turn to your attention and communicate back with you. I'd like to advise everyone that this is being recorded today and that the event is being broadcast via Facebook. So the link to the Facebook page will be shared with you shortly, and look into your chat dialogue for that sharing of that broadcast. Please also, and this is very important when we get to questions and answers later, in the bottom of your screen, you'll notice there's a Q&A button in the Zoom screen itself. When you are ready to ask a question, just click Ask the Question. If it pertains to the topic at the time when what they're talking about, they will answer it at that time. If it doesn't, we'll try to answer it at a later time. And if we happen to run out of time, they will get back to you with answers to all the questions. Very important. You can type your question in Portuguese, English, and/or Spanish. So I hope that kind of covers everything I needed to do to start this dialogue today and get this webinar started. So let's move on. We got a great program for you today. Again, it's hosted by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast out of Atlanta, Georgia, in partnership with InvestAmerica, an immigration consulting firm located in Charleston, South Carolina, and Tampa, Florida, and David Hearson and Partners, LLC, an international immigration law firm representing really investors through the immigration process around the world. So we've got a dynamic panel with us. Now, our topic for discussion today is of great interest to foreign families looking for a pathway to invest, live, and work in the United States with the E-2 visa. For this discussion, joining us today is a great team to guide you on this journey, which and through all of us will provide incredible sound experience and sound advice on options of how to apply for and obtain the E-2 visa. So the slide in front of you will actually show the panelists that are with us today. Mike Zennick, President and CEO of InvestAmerica. Mila De Ilano, who is Global Development Coordinator with InvestAmerica. David Hearson, who is the Managing Partner of his own firm. And Marcella Galick, who is Director of Business for David's firm, the David Hearson Partners firm. So I'd like to ask if each panelist would introduce themselves, starting by their name, with their name and company name, your position, responsibilities, and experience, and in the immigration industry, how it pertains to the E-2 visa. And Mike, if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with you. Mike Zennick, take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, please, and InvestAmerica.
Great, thank you, Gene. My name is Mike Zennick. I'm the founder, CEO, and president of InvestAmerica. I'm also the managing principal of Sequence Financial Specialists, which is a FINRA registered securities broker dealer based in Charleston. And InvestAmerica is the consulting arm of Sequence that essentially represents EB5 and E2 applicants and investors, as well as EB5 projects throughout the United States. Our main goal is focusing on high quality, very heavily analyzed and due diligence projects and investment opportunities for EB5 investors, for E2 investors, as well as other foreign investors that are looking for private investments inside the United States. Because we are a securities broker dealer, we have to take extra care in making sure that investors are protected and making sure that we direct them toward investments that suit their needs. And we've been doing this since 2010, and we worked with over 300 families, and for both EB5 as well as E2, our role is focusing on the business side of E2, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Thank you, Gene.
Thanks, Mike. Mila, would you mind taking a moment or two and introducing yourself, please?
Mute.
Uh-oh, might be muted.
Is one lesson we'll never learn in 2020. I'm sorry about that. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mila Deolano. I am originally from Brazil. I have been working with InvestAmerica for almost 2 years. I am the Global Development Coordinator, and I focus, my work is basically mostly of it with South America, but I also have been helping with other countries. So I'm here. If anybody has any question in Portuguese or Spanish, I'll be in the background today. The light is going to shine on Mike Zenek, but if anybody has any Portuguese or Spanish questions, I'll be right here to help out. Thank you.
Mila, thank you very much. David Pearson, would you mind introducing yourself and your company, and if you've been involved in an immigration process before? How about that?
Sure, Gene, thank you. Officially, welcome to everyone on this call, and welcome to those who are returning from last month's version. My name is David Herson. I am the co-manager and founder of David Herson & Partners. We are a law firm based in Southern California, and we have an office in Seattle, Washington as well. We do immigration law only, with a focus on business and investment immigration law. And we deal with just about every country in the world, and we have multilingual attorneys and staff people, so we can basically communicate in just about half of the languages available to those people who want that. I've been doing this for 35 or so years in the US after transferring from a law firm overseas. Therefore, I've used the system and I'm experienced in it for my own benefit. And we are able to use that experience, passing it on to our clients. We are here to assist people, making the process as transparent as possible, and just ask us questions. We don't always have the timer on to charge you by the second. We have flat fees, and we can work with you to make things convenient for you in achieving the results you are trying to get to. So with that, I'll pass you on to my esteemed director for Latin America. Over to you, Marcela.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcela Gellick, and I work at David Herson as the main point of contact for Latin American clients. I'm also a Brazilian attorney and a business immigration specialist with over 10 years of experience in this field. So we've seen it all. We worked with all kinds of cases, and I'll also be available here to answer any questions you might have in Portuguese or Spanish or even Italian. Okay. So here during the presentation and also after the presentation, please make sure you go to the questions and answers, and we can, address as fast as possible. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you for being here. And back over to you, Gene. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcella. Thanks, panelists, for your introductions. Certainly shows I have with me today some of the best and most competent team of professionals to talk about this immigration and E-2 visa process. So we'd like to get started here. We've got some presentation materials, and Today, we're going to pursue the details concerning the E-2 visa. And David, being one of the sharpest minds probably in the room today when it comes to these types of visas that I've ever met and come across against in the immigration and visa world, David has an incredible talent of describing all visas in a way that it just seems so simple and so easy when it's so complicated. So David, please help us today with an overview coming from you of the E-2 visa, its definition, its requirements, and timeline. David Hearson, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gene. So again, good afternoon to everyone. We're going to cover today the E-2 treaty visa and citizenship by investment, the purpose of the program, requirements, costs and processing times, E-2 and EB-5 comparison, and a travel ban and restrictions on immigration entry. So let's start off with the E-2 visa. This is one of the multiple alphabetically named visas in the US immigration laws. It is a non-immigrant visa. In other words, it is not permanent residence or the so-called green card, but it does entitle the holder of that visa to employment, and the spouse of that visa holder may also obtain employment. It requires an investment which is not nearly as large as the EB-5 permanent investment, which will be discussed in our next program. And it is far easier to obtain and far quicker to achieve an admission into the United States. So first of all, the individual must have the nationality of the country that has a treaty with the United States. Now, this is the only time when you can look at the citizenship of an individual and not only the place of birth. So if somebody has dual nationality, the treaty will apply if that dual national country has a treaty with the United States. So the treaty has to be with someone who is a member of a treaty country. The investment has to be substantial. Now, there's no bright line test here. This is an amount which fluctuates based on the facts of each case. Generally, we don't like to see anything under $150 US, but it could be less in some special circumstances, and the more, the stronger the case will be. The individual has to come to develop and direct this investment enterprise, or has to be there in some level of specialized management capacity. Ownership in the US enterprise must be at least 50% by nationals of the treaty country, whether or not that national is going to hold the E-2 visa, and it could be a corporation in that country which is controlled by nationals of that country. The 50% is a requirement for the control, and that makes that US enterprise a national of the treaty country. So in the case of Italy, as an example, people holding more than 50% of the enterprise makes it, in the eyes of the US under the treaty, an Italian enterprise. It has to be a real and operating enterprise. In other words, it can't simply be a shell with an idea that you're going to make this happen, or maybe even just have some money in the bank. This has to be far more committed to enable the case to be processed by the US consular embassy in the home country, or in certain special circumstances, may even be processed in the US by the USCIS, that's the US Immigration Service. The enterprise may not be marginal. Now, what does that mean? It means that the enterprise must be sufficiently profitable to make more money than simply to keep that E-2 investor person who's working there in sufficient income to make a personal living. Therefore, there has to be a return on the investment in addition to that. This standard can be dropped a little if the individual has an independent income that therefore relieves him or her from requiring any income from the particular enterprise in the US. Finally, the visa is not the same as a visitor visa or as a tourist or business visa or a student type visa, where you have to have a residence abroad that you intend to depart. It's a slightly lesser standard where you have to simply declare that it is your intention in the future, at the end of your E-2 visa, to return to your home country. We often have difficulty persuading the US consuls on this because they don't have a full understanding of it, but we've always been successful, even if it's taken a little while to get that message across, sometimes having to bring in Washington to add to our opinion. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The countries that have treaties with the US are listed on the screen. I'm not going to read each of them because it's not important, but what you will note is that Argentina is there, but Brazil is not there. Colombia, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador are there, and so on through the list. So if you're from a country that does not have a treaty, we have what is called citizenship by investment. This means you can invest in a country where you will be given the citizenship of that country. The main countries where the price is not very high and the issuance of that citizenship is fairly quick, sometimes as quickly as within 6 months of making the investment, are Grenada and Turkey. So these are choices that each individual can look at if you want to try specifically to qualify for an E-2 visa. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, the employee, that is the person coming to the US, could be the investor or just an employee, but must be a national of the E-2 investor country. And also said earlier, an executive or a supervisory employee or someone with essential skills may come in as an E-2 employee. There's a common misconception which relates to other types of visas that you must be employed for at least a year or some other period with your home company before you can come to an E-2 visa. That is not true. You simply need to show that you have the ability and skills and experience to fill the position being offered, and that you're a national of the appropriate country that has the treaty with the enterprise in the United States, and you can then come to the United States. Next slide, please. Certain procedural steps. Now we need to distinguish between the length of the visa that will be entered and embossed into the passport, which we will call stamped into the US, into the home country passport, which must be a treaty country passport, and the time that you're admitted into the United States, which historically used to be put onto a form called an I-94, which no longer exists. And the difference is that you may be given that visa stamp for between 1 and maybe for up to 5 years, depending on the arrangements between the US country, the US treaty country and the US, and what the consul thinks in their discretion is reasonable in relation to the strength and age, experience, and viability of the US enterprise. However, upon admission or entry into the United States, the individual will only be given 2 years. This is interesting because on certain visas, if you arrive 2 days before the visa expires, you may be lucky enough to be let into the country for 2 years. This is different with an E-2 visa because when you arrive 2 days before it expires, you will still be given a 2-year entry. And you can arrive into the US anytime as long as your up to 5-year visa stamp is valid. So you can actually run an E-2 visa for a minimum of 5 years and possibly even up to 7 if you enter just before the expiry of the 5 years. Thereafter, you have to make another application back to the US Embassy or consul to pick up the new visa and the passport. The E-2 visa spouse on application, which takes between 3 and 6 months, can also get work permission. And the spouse and unmarried children under 21 can attend any school in the US without having to get a student visa. This is a tremendous advantage, and that school can be started immediately upon arrival by the family. The visa itself, on its face, will not lead directly to a green card or permanent residence. So there are various methods to try and structure it so that it will, or to go into other types of visas which may qualify, including using the spouse to go into some other visa while the principal spouse investor carries on working in the E-2 company. Next slide, please. A new rule came through recently from the Department of State, and it was published in what is called the Foreign Affairs Manual, or the FAM. And that said that whereas historically you had to show actual physical premises for the operation of the US office, they at last moved into the 21st century and understood that with today's technology and modern electronics, some offices can be virtual. In other words, you can operate from a home office virtually and still run a proper enterprise. So now we can have virtual offices, and that is extremely helpful for many types of businesses, especially in software development and things like domain name sales and management, that type of thing. Next slide, please. The E-2 was not subject to the proclamations issued by the President of the United States recently, and therefore you don't have to worry about the proclamation stopping you from coming into the country. However, you could be stopped by other issues, namely that you're coming from a country that requires a 14-day quarantine in another country, and that most of the US consuls and embassies slowed down to a stop of processing visas and have only recently just started processing E-2 visas, amongst others, on a very slow basis. However, it is possible to apply for an expedited visa interview. This is only if it's applicable, because you're able to qualify for one of the exceptions for that expedite. There's a website on the screen, which is US travel visa, visa.docs, sorry, ustraveldocs.com, and that is where you will find your exceptions. Next. So we've been fortunate that as soon ago as April of this year, we were able to successfully obtain an E-2 visa for an E-2 applicant in 3 days. Then the individual, we managed to get an interview and the visa issued within another week. So it is possible if carefully done and the individual qualifies. Not every case will qualify, but you need to let us know and we'll hold your hand through it, and obviously make every effort to give you that extra service, which takes extra work and time, but is worth it if it is successful. Next slide, please. So I'll pass this over to Mike, I think it is.
David, thank you. Thank you. I got to get my camera back on. There we go. Well, I told y'all the man can describe the visa process equal better than anyone I've ever heard. Thank you, David. That was wonderful. So the E-2 visa, wonderful pathway for business-minded individuals who would like to use the E-2 as a pathway to the United States with their families, owning their own business, investing, living, working in the United States. What I'm going to turn to now is my attention and turn it to InvestAmerica. Mike, I know InvestAmerica offers incredible scope of services related to qualified franchises and other businesses, which would be a gateway for the investors looking into the E-2 visa and searching for opportunities to do so. Could you please tell us ways that InvestAmerica and your team can assist investors and their families when it pertains to the E-2 investor visa business decision process?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gene, and thank you, Dave, for that great presentation on the immigration side, and lots of really good information there. So the role that we play when it comes to E-2 is our role is to make sure that we blend the immigration side, which David Herson and his team handles, with the business side, which is what we focus on. We have a variety of things that we do. We sort of serve as we can serve as a one-stop shop for somebody that's looking to pursue the E-2 visa, from introducing them to somebody like David, as well as helping them to find a business, which is a multi-step process, and making sure that it's done properly. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And also to, introduce them and add to the team of people that are going to be instrumental in making sure that the E-2 petition is done properly, and that the business is set up properly and executed properly, at least from the starting position. So working with business attorneys that are also going to be necessary to set up the entities and some of the contracts that are going to be with the either franchise or other businesses that are acquired or invested in to make sure this happens, as well as a business plan writer to make sure that the business plan that USCIS requires is prepared properly and to their specifications, and also to just kind of hold your hand through the process, making sure that everybody's doing their job, making sure that the process is moving as smoothly as possible, and facilitating an efficient and comprehensive application to make sure that when your petition goes in, everything that needed to be done has been done properly, and then obviously waiting for the result. So here's a slide that kind of shows a couple of different options that we do, and we'll go through this in a little bit of detail. There's two options that we provide right now, and we're working on a third, which I'll talk about after this. Right now is a limited scope option. We have a limited scope option and a full scope option. Essentially, the limited scope option is you come to us and say, I'm looking for an E-2 visa, or David refers one of his clients to us and says, I've got somebody interested in E-2 and they need a business. So one of the options is we bring you into our proprietary access to the franchise and business listings that we have. And that is done through a very detailed process, which includes finding out all the information that we need to know about you to make sure that the business that's selected for you and your family is going to fit your needs. That includes what's your timing, how much money do you have to invest? As David mentioned earlier, $150,000 is usually the minimum that we're looking for that will pass the substantial investment test with U.S. immigration. Where do you want to live? How many people in your family are coming, which might be, focused on where you want your kids to go to school. Your spouse may want a job somewhere. So finding a place that has businesses that are more suitable to his or her skill sets. What things are you good at as far as business goes? What's your education? What's your experience? Do you want to manage this business actively on a day-to-day basis, or do you want to hire a management team to do it for you? How much setup time do you need? So we gather all that information and work with our access to active databases of available franchises and a variety of industries, available businesses that are currently for sale or ready for investment. And we kind of narrow it down to a list of, call it 4 to 6 choices for you to look at. At that point, our franchise consultants and business consultants will help you make a selection. We will also introduce you, as I mentioned, to E-2 immigration attorneys if that's necessary, to David, and then we're going to monitor the process. That's a limited scope option. The full scope option, we do everything I mentioned before, but we also are heavily involved in the franchise and business search, where we are sitting there along the way the whole time, making sure that your profile has been adequately interpreted, and making sure that the business options that are put on the table are suitable to your needs. Next step after that would be to conduct due diligence. Some companies and franchises we may have looked at, but most of them we weren't, because we have access to thousands of different businesses and franchises around the country. So in the full scope option, we do a very deep analysis of the options that are available to you to make sure that the business model has proven successful in other instances. Look at how many locations, excuse me, if it's a franchise, how many locations do they have? What's the background of the ownership group? Have they had any issues or problems in the past? We do background checks on them. We analyze all the financial statements. We look at lots of different things when it comes to making sure that that business is suitable for you and it's going to be at least the highest chance of success for you to operate that business. Then once you've selected a choice, we will sit next to you under the full scope option and negotiate the business terms on your behalf. Coming to the United States and operating in a different business environment, a different legal environment, a different environment in general is sometimes a little difficult. And we're there because we're investment bankers by trade. So over the course of my almost 30-year career now in investment banking, even before I got an EB-5, that's what I did. I helped with mergers and acquisitions, business acquisitions, and business financing to negotiate on behalf of our clients. And that's what we do for you under the full scope option. And then ultimately also make sure that the business plan is facilitated, the E-2 business plan specific for your petition. So we can do a variety of options based on your specific needs. Next slide. So some of the focusing on franchises, and actually before we get to there, just a real quick vision of the business options. If it's not a franchise, we do have access to a very large database of businesses that are for sale. So if a franchise doesn't suit you, we can find other businesses that do. Some people are looking to make even a more substantial investment. Some people are looking for something that's not quite a franchise or not franchisable, but they want to focus on a specific type of business, and making sure also that that business is suitable for E-2, because not every business, not every franchise is going to be the right choice for E-2. Some may not qualify based on their structure, number of employees necessary, and as we mentioned before, the investment amount. So shifting to franchise options though, this is a little sort of snapshot on what we do. As we mentioned, $150,000 minimum investment. We have access to right now over 140 franchise brands around the country in a variety of industries, be it healthcare services, pet care services, restaurants, business services, automotive, health and beauty, fitness. There's lots of different categories, lots of different options out there. And again, also based anywhere in the United States. Personalizing that to your experience, background, et cetera, as we mentioned before. And again, the option to represent you from the very beginning of the process to the very end of the process, making sure the team is working cohesively and efficiently. And lastly, and this is one of the very important pieces that makes us different than other E-2 consulting firms and other immigration consulting firms out there for investor-related visas, is we're through Sequence Financial Specialists, our broker-dealer, we are registered securities professionals. We are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States, and we have to operate within the parameters of that. And the main reason why securities laws were created, whether it's the US or anywhere else, is to protect investors. So because we're licensed through those securities regulatory bodies, we have to make sure that we are focused on your needs, making sure everything that we introduce to you and we recommend to you is done in your best interest and that you are suitable for that particular investment. It also means that once you've made a selection and you've invested and you've become our client, that we have to represent you and your interests pretty much for the rest of your investment period. So if there's ever an issue or a problem, whether it's E-2 or EB-5 or any of the other categories that we represent, we have to be there to act on your behalf and make sure that if there's an issue or problem, we help get that solved. It also means we have a very deep responsibility to make sure that businesses are analyzed as extensively as possible to minimize the risk and maximize the opportunity. So here's just a quick view. This is a very, very small list and kind of heavily weighted toward the health and beauty and fitness categories, but this is a very quick list of some of the brands that we represent on the franchise side. You'll see it's a little bit of a variety, but lots of brands. And if you're familiar, particularly with the health and beauty and fitness space, there's some very recognizable names on that list. So I'm not going to answer these questions, but you may have some of these questions. And some of them were answered by David, some of them were answered by me. But obviously, these are some of the key questions that people have. And we're here to as our mission statement at the top says, we exist solely to guide, protect, and support families as they immigrate to America. And that's our duty, both as a business representative as well as a securities and regulated firm. So I think we're going to move on to the next section here. So thank you very much, Gene, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. God, this technology is amazing. I'm 65 years old, and just imagine this would normally take place in the boardroom with all these folks gathered around, and we're all having a family discussion, and just amazing how we're able to do all of this. Mike, thanks for that great overview on the InvestAmerica process and how it really helps the family that wants to use the E-2 visa process to immigrate to the United States. And you have so many options. And with Dave on the immigration side and being able to competently handle all that, and y'all on the business side, it's just pretty cool to watch all of this. I know there's some folks that tend to believe that E-2 is an easier and cheaper version route to the access to America than the EB-5 program. However, in listening to David and Mike today, and they have so well explained how this whole process works, it does come, the E-2 visa does come with limitations. It's not permanent. It doesn't directly lead you to the U.S. green card. To make things clear to all potential E-2 investors today, what I'd like to do, David and Mike, please give us some pointers on the main differences between the E-2 visa and the EB-5 program. So I'm gonna kind of turn it over to both of you guys and let y'all just kind of help these folks listen and understand these differences. We've gotten the assets. Are there some liabilities out there? Thank you.
Sure. I'll take a quick just to introduction. This is a chart that we put together that has some of the differences. There are other differences, and we can also talk about some things that aren't on this chart. So with that, David, maybe you want to kind of get us started on explaining some of the differences between the two immigration options.
Okay, shall I give the E2s and you can answer with EB-5?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, so I'm going to run through from the top. First of all, it's the amount of the capital investment. This is not rigid as you might find with the other. You can come in at, as we said earlier, $150,000, even $100,000. The individual must work in the program and has to live near the program. You can get up to 5 years on the visa, and it can be renewed almost indefinitely, provided the treaty continues and that the business remains viable. The individual must be from the treaty country, and the enterprise in the US must have treaty nationality. And at the end of the period, the E2 visa holder is required to return to home country or to state an intention to do so. And this does not automatically lead to a permanent residence or green card. Mike, over to you. Contra that.
Absolutely. So in comparison, as you can see from the chart here, the difference of investment can be substantial. We mentioned a minimum for E2, but obviously some businesses, particularly if you're interested in a business that suits you better, the cost may be $300,000, $500,000, whatever, could be much higher, but it gives you the opportunity to get in much less than an EB-5 green card, which is either $900,000 for projects that are located in a defined targeted employment area or rural area, or if it's not in one of those areas, it's a $1.8 million investment, and the benefit's basically the same. So as far as the two investment amounts for the green card, those are prescribed numbers. They are what is in place right now. There's nothing, you can't get an EB-5 for any less than $900,000. You can live and work anywhere you want to. It's a passive investment for regional center transactions on the EB-5 side. So you can basically, you don't have to live where the project is. The initial length of stay is, typically it's, it depends on the timing of USCIS, but relatively speaking, you can usually get your conditional green card within 2 years. Then you have 2 years of conditional residency. Then you apply for those conditions to be removed once you've been able to demonstrate that the jobs have been created for the EB-5 investment. That also means that there's a risk that those jobs are not created, and then you don't get the green card. Anybody can apply from just about any country. There's a couple that have kind of come on and off the list based on some state restrictions, but relatively speaking, anybody can apply from any country. And your capital, on both sides, is at risk, especially on the green card, the EB-5 green card side. It's at risk, and you're in a passive investment, so there's not a whole lot you can do if things don't go well. We also say that even though your money is at risk, it's important to, and you don't have to invest in a risky project. Typically, if you invest in a good, solid project, your investor capital is going to be returned, again, depending on the timing of your final conditional green card, 5 to 7 years return of capital. So those are the key differences. One of the other differences I might mention is the tax, and we're not going to get into taxes, but generally speaking, when you get your initial conditional residency, you become subject to worldwide U.S. taxation. Whereas E2, you can do some tax planning strategies that will allow you to limit your tax exposure in the United States to whatever you have going on in the United States versus everything going on around the world. There's certain things you got to make sure you do there. And again, we're not going to get into tax planning, but that's a benefit that a lot of people like between the E2 and the EB-5.
I'm coming back. I'm clicking all the right buttons. David, is it safe to say, based on what you guys just said, E2 is an active involvement? I'm running my own business, visa to America that's not permanent. EB-5 is a passive investment into a transaction that gives me permanent green card. Is that a safe statement?
Generally, it's correct. E2 may not only be with a small business, you may be with, say, a company in the range of, let's say, from Korea, the Korean company Samsung. So you could be coming as a Samsung E2, but mostly it's for small businesses for their own, and that is correct. And so, yes, your statement is correct.
Just trying to bring it all down into one statement. And my God, this is a lot of information. Before we complete with this discussion today, David, I'd like to pull on you and take advantage of your words of wisdom one more second. Could you give us a little glimpse of your opinion to the latest updates on travel bans, visa-related issues, your predictions of what's going to happen in maybe the next 2 weeks versus if elections make change to presidents? What do you think that could do? Just give us a little glimpse in the next 6 to 12 months of what you're thinking about travel bans, visas, and so forth in the U.S.
Sure. Well, the Canadian-Mexican borders only allow at border people who are coming in for essential travel reasons. You can, however, fly into the U.S. from all over Canada and all over Mexico. Many of the procedural issues in U.S. immigration law have time limits in which you have to respond to the Immigration Service. A lot of them have been given an additional 60 days to respond to above the normal timing. However, things like change of status or extension of stays have not been given that extra timing. So this can create quite a bit of extra pressure and problem for those people who fit into those categories. More discussion on those categories, if anyone wants them, in subsequent questions you may have. Then there's countries subject to the travel ban. So those who come from certain countries cannot visit the US unless they stop off somewhere else that is not subject to this ban for 14 days in a form of quarantine. Then they can come in. And if you look at the list that's there, Brazil, UK, Northern Ireland, the Xinjiang areas, the Islamic Republic of Iran, China, but not including Hong Kong and Macau. So 14 days, you must stop off on your way in. Then the potential impact of this coronavirus issue on visa extensions, petitions, and applications, many of them are being held back. The reduced hours of the consuls, the reduced hours of the actual enterprises, and this is potentially creating problems with qualification for the visas on the US side. So that's basically the situation on those issues at this point. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, sir. And I didn't realize I had not turned the camera back on, so it was listening to my voice. Thank you. It's just ever-changing, ever-changing. It's amazing. So we're going to now head into the question and answer section. These questions are private. They aren't live on Facebook. No one will see it except the panelists to try to answer any questions. But before we get to the questions, I got a little save the date. November 18th. Please mark it down. That will be our next Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, InvestAmerica, David Hershen immigration webinar for EB5, Permanent Green Card Program. So save the date, November 18th. And we'll come back at that time and you will really understand the EB5 program and how InvestAmerica has an impressive platform in investment banking. We call it portfolio of EB5 offerings, and some big announcements will happen on that day about EB5 and how our two teams can work together to help you. So I'd like to open it this time for some questions and so that our panelists can give answers. If anybody out there has any questions, I'm going to be quiet and see if we have any questions at this time. I've got to look over at the camera.
Feel free to submit your questions in Spanish or Portuguese as well. We've got Mila and Marcela that are available here to answer anything that you have if you want to express it in a different language.
Being the new chairman of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, I lack two things. I don't speak Portuguese and I don't speak Spanish. So I have to rely on this great team to help me if we have any issues there. But, okay, no questions at this time. That means you guys did an incredible job of delivering the information, which I knew you would, and you carefully went through each and every piece of all that we talked about, which I knew you would. I want to thank everybody who participated on this webinar today. Just, you know, amazing group of people. We'll be sharing an overview presentation along with the recording today of the events with everybody that participated. So we'd like for you to please remember about our upcoming webinar. Please don't hesitate to share the information that comes to you today with any friends, relatives that might be interested to learn more about what's happening with EB5 coming up, to learn about what you've learned today. A lot of information, and this is less than an hour, 5:53. So we've completed all of this in less than an hour, which is wonderful. Go ahead.
It looks like we have a question.
Okay, please.
Ladies.
Marcela, do you want to take it?
Sure. So, so Renata is basically asking that she has a little doubt here. Is the investment of 100 to 150 must be done before the application of the visa, or it can be done throughout the 5 years of the visa validity?
Yes, you cannot simply have an idea. You have to be committed to the actual business enterprise. Mm-hmm. And that would mean that one of the things you have to do is show you have the money and it's put into the program. You may be able to stagger the payment under certain circumstances, But generally, if you want an easy approval and a clean case, form your enterprise in the US, invest the money, and get the business committed, even if you can stop it along the way if you don't get your visa through what is called an escrow. But nonetheless, our advice will always be make sure all the money is put into your company. It's not at risk on any great basis because you still control, but it needs to be there to show that you are committed and you have certain contracts like leases and equipment and other maybe commercial contracts for supply of your goods or services. So you can't have just an idea. It has to be something that's fairly advanced in its commitment and risk. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I would add to that and say, you know, it's also going to depend on the business or franchise that you acquire. They may require more upfront, and they may let you invest the rest of it at different periods of time. You may have to, you may not need to invest it all at the same time, meaning that let's say you get a franchise and you need to do a build out of that particular location. So you pay the franchise fee, and then it may take you time to do the build out. So the payment, you know, from that perspective, it may take time. But however, you know, making sure all along the way, as David said, you're doing things within the confines and requirements of the program itself.
Thank you.
I think we have another question.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was Lorena. She was asking about how to know about more information on the franchises and business opportunity. And I encourage her to get in touch with us because, as Mike was saying, it's very personalized. It all depends really what your experience is, what are you looking for. So please, if you have any questions, you would like any advice on us on which business you should look into, get in touch with me. I put my email in the chat. Mila.deolano@investamerica.com, and Mike and I will love to get on a call with you and discuss your goals. Mm-hmm.
I might also mention that we from time to time have certain franchises available to us. So we would first look to Mike, and if they may not have something you want, we may have some other inventory to show you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I guess, you know, I failed to mention this earlier. I don't think we have any other questions. One of the things that I mentioned the two options that we have. The third option that we are looking at, we are actively pursuing right now and should have up on our website, and certainly by the end of the year we're looking to have this in place, is a portfolio of specific actual franchises in each of those business categories that I mentioned, having at least one or two plug and play options, meaning, you know, ones that if you say, yes, I'd like that one, then it's already set up for E-2. It's already, we've already done the due diligence. We already have a prescribed investment amount, and it will allow you to pursue the business much more quickly. However, we're always available for the broader search to make sure that, you know, you're looking at all the options that you want. But that portfolio approach, our goal is to have that up and available by the end of the year.
Mike, that's fantastic. There's just something else that might be available. Some of these franchises may be able to be managed by the existing franchise holder, so that you will have less direct day-to-day requirement, although you'll still have to be available for management. And that's another design that can be put into play. And I'm sure Mike has some of those available for you too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very good point, David.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or any other comments? Because it's now time, as the new chairman of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeastern Atlanta, for me to plug our chamber. So we are actively looking for members. We are growing. We are going to double in size this coming year. We are excited about our new why the chamber. How do we network with each and every member and understand the members and what their business is, and how we can help anyone coming into the United States and or coming from Brazil back out of the United States back to Brazil. How can we help them through our chamber members work with each other and help their businesses and their families in their lives? So I'm proud that the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce can host an event like this, participate in an event like this. I'm proud to be its chairman. And there's my Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce statement for the afternoon. So on behalf of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, on behalf of InvestAmerica and David Harrison, partners, I thank each and every one of you for attending today and the panelists being here. And don't forget to like our respective company pages, Facebook pages, LinkedIn pages, Instagrams, because it helps us all get the information we're looking for to grow and understand what's happening. And please do remember the November 18th event. Thank you for being here today and look forward to you being at the next event. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.